You know that person who texts back in like 2 seconds every single time, no matter what. You send a message and boom, they're already typing. While you're still putting your phone down, they've already responded. But here's the thing, this isn't just about being polite or having nothing else to do. There's actually some pretty interesting psychology behind why certain people can't help but reply instantly to every message they get. So let's talk about what's really going on in the minds of instant responders. And honestly, you might recognize yourself in some of these patterns. Now, before we get into this, I want to make something clear. Replying quickly to messages isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's just being considerate. But when someone responds instantly to every single message, every single time, without fail, that's when it becomes a pattern worth looking at. Because patterns tell us something about what's happening beneath the surface, and understanding this can actually help you understand your own texting habits or the people in your life who do this. First, let's talk about anxiety. And I'm not talking about clinical anxiety here, though it can play a role. I'm talking about that low-level social anxiety that makes people uncomfortable with unfinished conversations. For instant responders, an unopened message or an unanswered text feels like an open loop. It creates tension. It's like when you leave a task halfway done and your brain keeps nagging you about it. That's what happens to these people with messages. They see a notification and their brain immediately goes into this mode where they think, I need to close this loop right now. The message sits there like an itch they have to scratch. And the only way to make that uncomfortable feeling go away is to respond immediately. It's not really about the other person, it's about managing their own internal discomfort. But here's where it gets interesting. This type of anxiety often comes from a deeper place. It's connected to how they view relationships and their place in other people's lives. Which brings us to the second psychological factor, the need for validation. Look, we all want to feel valued and appreciated. That's just human nature. But instant responders often take this to another level. Every message they receive is a little confirmation that someone is thinking about them, that they matter to someone, that they exist in someone else's world. And by responding instantly, they're doing two things. One, they're keeping that connection alive. They're making sure the conversation doesn't die, because if the conversation dies, maybe the relationship dies too. At least that's what their brain is telling them. And two, they're showing the other person, hey, you're important to me, I prioritize you. Because deep down, they hope that by being super responsive, other people will value them more. It's like they're trying to earn their place in your life by being the most available person you know. Now, let's talk about something that might sound contradictory at first: control. You'd think instant responders are just being passive and reactive, right? They're just responding to whatever comes their way. But actually, there's an element of control in this behavior. Think about it. When you control the speed of a conversation, you're actually controlling the flow of the relationship. By responding instantly, they're keeping the conversation going at their pace. They're not giving you time to forget about them or move on to something else. They're staying present in your mind. And here's the thing, some instant responders actually feel uncomfortable when they're not in control of their social interactions. Leaving a message unanswered means the other person is in control. They sent something, and now it's just sitting there, and the instant responder has no idea what the other person is thinking or doing. Are they waiting for a response? Are they annoyed? Have they moved on? That uncertainty drives them crazy, so they respond immediately to take back that control, to manage the interaction, to make sure they know exactly where they stand. But there's another layer to this, and it has to do with how these people view their own time and priorities. For a lot of instant responders, there's this underlying belief that they should always be available, that their time isn't really that valuable or that important, or that other people's needs should always come before whatever they're doing. This often stems from people-pleasing tendencies. They've learned, maybe from childhood, maybe from past relationships, that being available and responsive is how you maintain connections with people. That if you're not immediately available, people will get upset or lose interest or find someone else who is more available. So they've trained themselves to drop everything the moment a message comes in. It doesn't matter if they're in the middle of something. It doesn't matter if they're trying to focus on work or enjoy a movie or have dinner. The message takes priority because the person sending it takes priority. Always. And look, this might seem generous and thoughtful on the surface, but it's actually kind of exhausting for the person doing it. Because they never really get to be fully present with whatever they're doing. They're always one notification away from shifting their attention to someone else. Now let's talk about something called rejection sensitivity. This is a big one for instant responders. People with high rejection sensitivity are constantly scanning for signs that they're being rejected or excluded or thought less of. And in the world of texting, delayed responses can feel like mini rejections. So when someone with rejection sensitivity receives a message, their brain is like, answer now or they'll think you don't care. Answer now or they'll get mad. Answer now or they'll assume you're ignoring them. The instant response becomes a way to prevent potential rejection before it even happens. And here's what makes this tricky. Sometimes this sensitivity is based on real experiences. Maybe they've had people get genuinely upset with them for not responding quickly enough. Maybe they've lost friendships or relationships because they weren't available enough. So their instant responding becomes a protective behavior, a way to make sure that doesn't happen again. But even when it's not based on real experiences, the fear is still there. And it's strong enough to make them respond to every message immediately just to be safe. There's also something called fear of missing out that plays into this. And I'm not just talking about FOMO in the traditional sense. I'm talking about the fear of missing out on being part of someone's life in real time. Instant responders often feel like if they don't respond right away, they're missing the moment. The conversation will have moved on. The opportunity to connect will have passed. They want to be there for every moment, every conversation, every little thing that happens in their friends' or families' or partners' lives. And responding instantly is how they make sure they don't miss anything. It's how they stay relevant and involved. But here's something most people don't realize about instant responders. A lot of them are actually struggling with boundaries. And I don't mean they're bad at setting boundaries with other people. I mean they're bad at setting boundaries with themselves. They can't draw a line between I'm working right now and I'm available to chat, or between I'm having personal time and I need to respond to this message. Everything blends together because they haven't established internal rules about when it's okay to not respond immediately. And this lack of boundaries often comes from a deeper issue with self-worth. If your sense of value is heavily tied to how useful you are to other people, or how available you are, or how quickly you can meet other people's needs, then taking time for yourself feels selfish. It feels wrong, so you don't do it. Now, there's one more psychological factor I want to talk about, and it's actually pretty fascinating. It has to do with dopamine and the reward system in our brains. Every time we get a message, our brain gets a little hit of dopamine. It's exciting. Someone reached out to us, and when we respond and get a reply back, we get another hit. For instant responders, this cycle can become almost addictive. They've trained their brains to associate messages with immediate rewards. See message, respond to message, get dopamine. See message, respond to message, get dopamine. Over and over again. And the thing about dopamine is that our brains start to crave it. So these people start checking their phones more often, hoping for messages. And when they get them, they respond immediately because that's what triggers the reward. Delaying the response would delay the reward, and who wants to do that? This is why instant responders often seem kind of restless or anxious when they haven't gotten any messages in a while. Their brain is literally waiting for that next hit. But here's what's really interesting, and this is something that instant responders usually don't realize about themselves. Their behavior actually affects how other people communicate with them. When you always respond instantly, people start to expect it. They get used to it. And then if you ever don't respond right away, they notice. They might even get concerned or annoyed. So instant responders end up trapped in this cycle they created. They respond instantly because they're worried about what people will think if they don't. But by responding instantly all the time, they've actually trained people to expect instant responses. It becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, and breaking out of that pattern is really hard because it requires disappointing people's expectations. It requires being okay with someone potentially being annoyed that you didn't respond right away. For someone who's already anxious about relationships and rejection, that's incredibly difficult. So what does all this mean? Well, if you're an instant responder, understanding these psychological factors can help you recognize what's driving your behavior. And maybe, just maybe, you can start to create some healthier texting habits. You can start to set boundaries. You can start to realize that your worth isn't determined by how quickly you respond to messages. And if you know someone who's an instant responder, hopefully this gives you some insight into what they might be dealing with. It's not just about being glued to their phone. There's usually something deeper going on. The truth is, healthy communication isn't about responding instantly. It's about responding thoughtfully when you're actually available and present. It's about respecting your own time and energy while also being considerate of others. And that's something both instant responders and slow responders could probably work on. Because at the end of the day, the quality of our relationships isn't measured by response time. It's measured by genuine connection, mutual respect, and understanding. And sometimes that actually requires us to slow down and be more intentional about how and when we communicate. If this video made you think about your own texting habits, hit that subscribe button for more psychology content.